In this video, I'm going to begin my most intense analysis of the book of Genesis. It has 50 chapters in it, and I've decided I'm going to do one video, one chapter, 50 videos. And that's because there's something I found in there that warrants that kind of scrutiny. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video. I'm an independent researcher that has been, a lifelong student of global myth and religion. But of late, I've gotten, in the last few years, very intense about studying patterns that I see in the background of material. Now, I need to let everybody know that I'm approaching this very objectively as a researcher. I am not a theist or an atheist that is bent on trying to prove or disprove something about the teaching of the material. I'm somebody that says there's a pattern in there and that pattern is there for a reason, that pattern is holding something that is a deeper nested lesson. And that's what I want to go after. It's like there's a curtain. The story is the curtain. I want to get behind the curtain, and I've gotten behind the curtain. And I want to show you what is back behind the curtain. However, be aware that you have to see it for yourself. But when I pull up numbers, that will show you that something is there. You're going to see a consistency in what I'm doing. If you give it time to watch, that'll blow your socks off. This is something you've never seen before. Okay, I'll post a link below to the beginning that shows how these numbers are collected. There's a number pool that we're going to be working with. And I've been going through the Bible and seeing how this number pool is rolling along on a template, showing something there. There's basically 22 numbers that are collected here in Genesis through a weird numbering process that we can analyze and figure it out. The Sodom stories and the 900 years, 800 years, all of that stuff. There's patterns in the material. But I want to show you how the patterns work and why we cannot see them. First of all, we need to be aware that we're reading the stories in the Bible. We don't have them memorized. They had them memorized, but not only did they have them memorized, if you can imagine thousands of people with no technology, pre-technology, the society is booming, it's burgeoning. This is a big story. It's not just a religious teaching to hold on to and then go about your business. What would you do on a day-to-day basis? How do you occupy your time? How do you manage a population? The religions become very important, but there's still, nevertheless, there's something at a deeper level that the religions are made upon, and that is something that we're not accessing, and here is why. This is 5,000 years old. There were no schools. People did not read and they did not write. They told stories verbally. Genesis, if you had Genesis in your head, if somebody was reading it to you, you could do it that way. But by and large, this was meant to be memorized. That's how it traveled. That's how you would have it. That would be your iPhone regularly. You're off on your own all day long going through, you know what? There's something in here that you don't just memorize the story. There's something deeper. It's a term I call deep memorization. I don't know what it is. Let me give you an example. Let's say we had something memorized, like a short little nursery rhyme. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. However, it goes on. And we have that memorized and go, okay, well, that's fine. The deep memorization would come in this process. How many times was twinkle said? Twice. How about star? We'd have to start doing that, and then you would memorize that. Now, imagine that on a Genesis scale. That's a lot of nouns and verbs that you would have to know how many times they're repeated, and that's exactly what they're doing. Watch this. I'm just going to jump in and show you in some really extreme places how to see the code when it's just in your face and how to recognize it. It's going to become more subtle, but here are some examples. Right here we've got Noah in the story of Noah. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generation, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Noah is being just repeated over and over again. This is telling you, hey, count these. All right, this is where you and I are 12-year-old kids 5,000 years ago, and I'm asking you, how many times was Noah said? I got to count. What do you come up with? And you start thinking, 41 times. And I go, yeah, I got the same thing, 41. Okay, is that important? Why would it be important, or would it be important? In this case, I'm gonna throw a shock out here first, and then I'm going to move on to Genesis. See, because we're hanging out with a friend who comes from he's Babylonian descendancy, but we're all friends, and they're telling us about the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, the epic, and they say, Marduk is the called hero in the Enum Elish, and Marduk is repeated exactly 41 times too. Isn't that interesting? I did that to get your attention. You know what? That's nothing. We haven't even started. Let's go to Genesis and just focus there. All right, more. This took a lot of analysis. If you look at it now, you go, okay, that might make sense. I'm not sure. You just have to look at it and think about it for a while. It took a lot of analysis for me to get here, but there's total consistency within the patterns. We get down here, we're going to be collecting more numbers. But as we read this, it's what you're reading that should sound funny. 50 righteous within the city will you also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that were there within. Far be it from you to do in that manner to slay the righteous with the wicked. And the Lord said, if I find 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare them. And then what about there's 50 righteous? So there's this righteous going on. And if you counted those, or if you knew what those were, you come and ask me that one, hey, Daniel, what was that righteous said down there in the Sodom farm? How many counts did you get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, 7. And then the numbers, well, 50 is said 4 times, 40 is said 3 times, 5 is said 3 times, 30 is twice, 20 is twice, 10 is twice. And in the beginning, Abraham is said twice. Right here, if you jump from here, if you took that whole section of numbers out and just went from 21 right here and then jump right down into the next verse, nothing would be different. All this is would you destroy it? No, I won't. Would you? No, this is just collecting numbers right here. That's all it does. Nothing changes in the story. Abraham is said twice to open this field. And down here at the end, Abraham is said twice to close it out. This is their code. It's in the story. It's in the repeat. It would be accessible to anybody who had the story memorized and could reason it through. All right, here's another way to collect code. And yet what you have to do is read these things and go, what the? Okay, because you should read these. We have a verse here. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. It's like just something weird out of the blue that you go, oh, okay, I don't know. We don't give that any thought. We don't. But I'm going to show you something that's happening right here. First of all, we've got a 7 and a 7. We don't treat this as a compound number. There's a 7 twice, and that surrounds a 70, and it starts right here. Is that important? Move along, and we get down here, and we're going to see, in all the days of Lamech, were 770 and 7. We're going to see a 7 and a 70 and a 7 right here. And in between these two, we've got that whole weird numbering pattern. That's the analog farm. That's the Adam analog farm, where 900 is said 7 times, 800 is said 7 times. They're still using 7s to gather things. But between these two, we've got 7 repeated 4 times and 70 repeated twice to start and stop this analog farm. And if we came over here and looked, we would actually see that 70 is also repeated exactly 5 times in the book of Genesis. So it's going to be just this grid cross-reference numbering. And I say that it's hard, but it's not. It's really super simple. The reason it's hard is because we have to look at it this way. We are deficit in not having it memorized. If we had it deep memorized, this would be easy for us. We don't have the game loaded. Okay, so the reason for collecting up all of those numbers is the link in the video below. I can't repeat all that stuff. It gets too big. But I'll just tell you that those 22 numbers that we're going to collect right here are used over 6,000 times throughout the Bible. That's the repeating process that's going along in the background that's deep enough that we don't see it. But the code is in the numbers. The interpretation doesn't get lost that way. Doesn't matter what language you speak it in, 7 is 7. You can't mess that one up. You can mess up concepts, but you can't mess up counts. So it's very clever code. Now, people that have been following, I'm going to give you a break. I'm not going to repeat all that stuff. If anybody else wants to follow along, you really have to start with that other video. I'm going to jump into it. But what I want to do is talk about a couple of things before getting into it. Number one, how the chapters and the verses came about, because that's critical in something that I'm analyzing here. Somebody did something very purposeful that I want to talk about. Okay, what we have, when the books of the Bible were originally written, they did not contain chapter or verse references. The Bible was divided into chapters and verses to help us find scriptures more quickly and easily. It is much easier to find John chapter 3 verse 16 than it is to find "For God so loved the world." In a few places, chapter breaks are poorly placed and as a result divide content that should flow together. Overall, though, the chapter and verse divisions are very helpful. The chapter divisions commonly used today were developed by Stephan Langton, an Archbishop of Canterbury. Langton put the modern chapter divisions into place around 1227 A.D. The Wycliffe English Bible of 1382 was the first Bible to use this chapter pattern. Since the Wycliffe Bible, nearly all Bible translations have followed Langton's chapter divisions. All right, I want to talk about a couple of things that are there that we need to understand and that are observable, especially in the verses. But there's something in the chapters too. They talked about that one poorly placed one. There's a reason for that. It's right between the first and the second creation story is one of them. Another one is that there's two flood stories. And I said that wrong. There's one flood story, but there are two times where the calling, what you must load on the boat, there's two different versions of that right there. Two different stories. So there's kind of some story stitching that's been going on that created conditions for him to have to do that. He didn't have any choice. That will become evident when we see what I'm talking about. First of all, if you look through, you will notice if you read through the chapters are logical. The chapters would have been that way anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's first creation, there's second creation. Then there is the sin story, that whole thing happens, and then you get kicked out of the garden, then Cain and Abel, then that moves on, then life goes on, then a lineage. You can see a progression in the story of steps along the way. Then the world gets destroyed, or needs to be destroyed. Then the world gets destroyed. These are natural story breaks, so that's where the chapters are put in. You don't need to have those chapters there to know that those are story breaks. You would already know that automatically. You might not know that the flood happened on chapter 7 by reading the Bible, but you would know that by memorizing the story that was the 7th step along the way. You would know that it was the 7th stage. So that 7-chapter break is logically there. Now, when it comes to verses, something's different. And I'll tell you why. If you read through, you will see that there is something odd going on. If you were tasked to put in verses, if you look, you'll see that he put in verses, and in many cases, one sentence, one verse. Next sentence, next verse. Next sentence, next verse. Doesn't that make sense? In some places, it's not that way. In some places, it's a short sentence or a short part of a sentence, and then it goes to the next one, and it looks like, what happened right there? Why did you not complete it that way? There's something going on in the numbering that he's very purposefully doing that takes a lot of work to see what that is. But there's an inconsistency in what he's doing, and there's a reason for that inconsistency. So this is very critical to know those chapters and verses. They're a part of the numbering system that we need to know. That was like something I've kind of recently discovered. That was observation. As we move along, you'll see it. And to make sure I'm clear, what I'm saying here is that even though they said the reason was the chapter and verses, so that, imagine people are corresponding by letters back and forth, and you're trying to have a discussion with somebody not in person, but you're using the Bible now so you can reference back and forth. How would you know? Go to about the middle of the book of Acts, and something like that. It's easier to do this. People can just go right to it. So that's what they're saying. It was the purpose for it. But when you look through the numbering pattern, you're going to see that is a secondary purpose, that's an important thing, but there is something going on in the background it's another layer. It is quite literally, the more I analyze it, the more I realize it is an aid to help me understand what is going on. There was a time when these stories were memorized and they knew that. Now that they're not memorized, we've lost access to that, to the counts, to the numbering system. His pattern in the numbering system is steering us to that number pattern. It's very specific where he's numbering things. When he doesn't number in the right place or at the end of a sentence logically, it's because he's pushing a meaning in a sentence into the right location to give it that number, to give it that verse number. It's clever. All right, I've got Genesis 1 up right here. Let me just go ahead and delete this out. That's the Langton thing. I don't want that to be part of the search or part of the final document. That was just, we got that covered. Okay, so what I have is the Genesis 1, the way that Langton has it numbered, all the way down to 31. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the logical story part to it. And that is right down here. I'll just put it on the next page, I guess. Oops. All right, so he has chapter 2 starting right here. There, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had made. All those are into chapter 2, when they, in all actuality, belong with the style of this first creation story. It's the 7-day creation story. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like the Babylonian 7 tablets of creation. We got 7 going on here. Why would you push the 7 into a separate... Why would you do that? You see, that's one of those places where it's like, the next creation story actually should have started right down here. So, why did he do that? Why did he do that? There's a reason for it. And I'm going to tell you as part of the numbering system. First of all, here is where the numbers are developed. That's why I put that back up here. Do you see the 777 said 3 times right there? That's it. Bingo. Code. 7 is said 3 times. That means 3 and 7 both become the same number, but they're sitting on a template. This step is a template step. And it sits parallel to the second creation story. So this is going to be naked, unashamed, in the Garden of Eden, is a metaphorical location for us in our mind as a child, as a kid, before we got exposed to the pain of life. And similar to that is a 3 or a 7. So now if we have a 3 or a 7, that's going to, as an analog, replicate this same pure state early on. That'll make sense as we move on. Or if you were to think of the story of Job early on, are they nesting it? Yeah. He starts off with 7 sons and 3 daughters. What do we have right here? 7 said 3 times. It's nested in the background, but it's there. But it's in counting. It's available to us. We just don't do that with it. Okay? Now, that 7th is a critical thing then. In fact, here is the number pool that we have to work with. There's a 3-7 grid, I call it. Eden. 7 is repeated 3 times. Conscious and inner self in pure state. Life has not collected judgments. But then these are all the numbers that we've collected. Again, the other video is what talks about all of this right here. These are all the good things we want. 7 and 3 are good things. And look at right there. 8 is not a good thing. The reason, of course, if 7 is pure state, then first sin becomes 8 by default. 12 is going to step up to 1. 20 up to 21. That is not 100% across the board. There are other things going on. It's more complicated than what I'm saying here. But it's this simple. It really is. It's a matter of collecting these numbers and then utilizing them. Those numbers are going to become ages, quantities, dates. Yeah, you can add zeros to them. You got a 5,000 cattle, 5,000 sheep. Further, as you can look by seeing at my list here, the wine is repeated 12 times in Genesis. So there's something else that's going to be happening now. These are going to be analogous terms, and the numbers are going to give them a weighted value. Nakedness, naked, these are all good things. Uncovered, covenant, righteousness, righteous, these are all in the spiritual world. Uncovered, naked. Wine is a new feeling. Naked means I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm uncovered. I'm healed. We get down here and we see things like Sodom is repeated 21 times. Creature is repeated 13 times. Adah is repeated 8 times. Zillah. Lamech is 10. Lamech has 2 wives. This is us, our consciousness. We have 2 inner selves. One goes good, one goes bad. That's how they're encoding in the background at a really deep level. But it would be simple to do if we had it deep memorized. All right, now the first thing I want to suggest is now I realize that within each chapter, they're also specifically keeping account. If the words are there, actually what I need to do is just demonstrate what I'm talking about. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now I remember right here, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And down here at the end, I remember... Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. I know heaven and earth are both repeated in here. So what I want to do is take a look at, this is the logical story. This is not Langton's break. This is the logical story with all 7 days put together. Look what happens if I search for how many times the word heaven appears in here. 8 times. 8 is a bad number. We just saw that in building the analog farm, that we don't want heaven to be 8. 8 on the template metaphorically represents first sin. And what first sin is that we are beginning to start living through our memories. Instead of our happy, disconnected childhood selves, we're now beginning to live through our judgments, our pain. We got hurt. I don't like this. I'm disappointed. They're gone. I'm hurt. All of that we begin to learn through. That's 8 right there. Heaven is the goal we're looking for that is pure of that. So right here, we got something went haywire, bad. I do have to say that you have to watch what I'm doing, and you would never know this unless you're doing what I'm doing. I would never have known it either. You have to look and see what's happening and go, oh, there's a logic to that. If we were to go to Genesis chapter 2, we would see that heaven appears 2 times. 2 times is okay, but 8 times is not. If we look down here at the very bottom, what did Langton do? He took this completely out. He pushed it into the next chapter. Now if we come look for heaven, it appears 7 times. It's exactly what we want. And in the second chapter, it appears 3 times. We've got our 7-3 grid happening. Look what else, though. Do you see down here where he put the verses in? This is the micro. The 7th, right there, the one said 3rd time. The 3rd time we collect it is in verse 3. That's the micro we're going to be seeing that he's doing, that's trying to guide us along the way. In fact, look, if I go down into the second creation story, let's go down and see what's happening on verse 7. And Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Right there, that is us being born on the template. But he's doing something that if you look at and go, what the heck? Why is he doing that? You know what? There's a reason for it. Very specific reason that we can see by simply looking at numbers. All right, so he's completely giving top billing to the template right there. But unless you interpret the template and see what they're doing, you don't see that. It's just numbers. It's just sequences. It's a mystery. It's a deep mystery. But it is totally mentally accessible. How do we know? I'm going to show you another thing. This is some goofy stuff in the Bible. You have to watch for these. If you can make sense out of them, you're on track. If you treat them at face value, you're not reading them. They don't make sense. Let's take a look at this. All right, if we read through pieces like this, there's some very rich things in here, but there's one thing specifically I want to look at right now, and that is to process this. Terah, the dad, lived 70 years and had Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So Terah has 3 sons. Number of things go on, but down here at the end, what we see, Terah, the dad, his days were 205 years, and he died in Haran. He died in sight of his son. How does somebody die in sight of their son? If that can't make sense, we're not getting any place. These are iterations of us. Long ago, I was a kid that got caught stealing a bag of cookies from the grocery store. That was me, but I gave iterations of me came along. That person, I'm not somebody that goes and steals cookies in grocery stores, okay? That person died inside of me. I have become something different. That's how these work. They're mental inner processes. Literalists have at it. All right, let's look at a big picture here. Here's the entire book of Genesis. What I'm going to do is not isolate the chapter, but go through the entire book, because I'm going to contend that number is not just maintained within a chapter, but within the entire book to mean something. So if I look for heaven here, in Genesis I get 33, which is a combination of the number 30 and the number 3, so that is very good. That's exactly what I want. And if I go chapter by chapter, it's going to be accurate, I'm certain. So the shifting of that 1 right there made it so that 8, so in chapter 1, it did not appear 8 times. All it did was made sure it stayed 7 times there and 3 in the next. He put priority to that template. And By that I mean utilizing the numbering sequence to continually shore up and point to the template, which is made with numbers anyway. He's using the numbers that he's added in to point to the numbers that we're not seeing. Okay? If that makes sense. Psst, there's a 7 over there. I see a 3 said 7 times. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's kind of tricky that way. Okay, with all that done, it should become fairly evident that I'm going to be going through every chapter through the book of Genesis with a fine-tooth comb. With all of this in mind, this is what we're going to just get into and go with. It is an internal path, but it's also the creation of a religion. It's got something bigger going on at a deeper level for the individual, for the seeker, for the person that can enter the narrow gate, for the person who can see inside the ark. All right, there's one more big overview I want to provide before starting in Chapter 1, actually. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 are both creations, and both of those represent not just the human being created, our life being created, but how we come about. Cause and effect, cycles, things of that nature are going to be nested in there. That we're going to become products of our thinking, that whatever we name, we're going to cycle around. All of that kind of stuff is going to be nested in verbiage that is going to sound all over the map depending on where you go. We have to unlock the analogs. If something is growing from your garden, that means something emerging from you, from your mind, from your inner being. That doesn't mean the garden out back. We have to treat all the verse that way. Now, as we go through, we're going to find that all the way from chapter 1, where birth happens, or the creation, I don't know, impregnation, whatever, the creation of a human being begins, all the way up to the time where your life is frazzled and you say, I'm done, I'm fit to be tied, I'm going to turn inward and start healing myself or resolving this issue, is chapter 1 through 6. Chapter 6 is where the world is destroyed. The sons of God have impregnated the daughters of men, the beautiful daughters, and offspring are these big Nephilim. What we have encoded in there is that life experiences have created conditions such that we're angry and mad and we're acting out. We see that happening now in people that call themselves Christians, but they're really living at, as far as I'm concerned, chapter 6. Yeah, chapter 6. All right, within these 6 chapters, though, there's a lot of rich stuff packed in there. We start off naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden. That's our childhood self that's unexposed to life. When we move into first sin, that is represented by the idea that we are now learning the difference between good and bad. Life is not what I thought. It's not all grandma's lap and chocolate chip cookies. Man, it's rape, molestation, abuse, bad names, words, violence, hurt. I see it's different. We stop living from a higher awareness and start living through our memories. And then what's going to happen is we're being told we're going to have cyclical pain as a result, the pain in childbirth. We're going to be living off of the sweat of the land and eating of its food. We're going to be living life unaware of the fact that we're doing that. We're judging life experiences, watching media. That's what those people this, those people that. We're living life that way instead of detached, going, no, that's just a mass of stuff going on that I can either be a part of or not. Most people are. Most people are a part of that out there. So not many people are going to do this to begin with. But what happens then after that, we've got a division, the Cain and Abel. We divide. There's a division that happens. We go bad. There's a lineage that then picks up after that where time goes by. We're going to learn about tents and pipes and making clay pots and whatever back then represents the idea that you're going to go off in life now being what you are. You're going to get your jobs. You're going to go do whatever it is you do. You're going to have your life experiences up to a certain point. That's what that is. And then there's a point where life goes bad. There's 2 bailout options within this story, that the story is taking the worst path. There's 2 ways out. The first one is that if in the Garden of Eden, if we had not partaken of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but had partaken of the tree of life. But what would that represent? That's going to be somebody that comes from an environment that's like raised in a monastic environment where they're taught right from the get-go, don't attach like that. This is how life really works. Don't go start creating this life of bad memories that you then have to sort through later. You can be taught from the beginning to not just blindly go out and judge the hell out of life, but most people do. So that option is not a very big option for most people. The other option is Cain and Abel. You could have become the good person instead of the one that went bad. instead of the one that killed off the other. So there's a couple of things that happen. You could also, and then you wouldn't get down here to chapter 6. You would never need a flood. You would just live a good, happy life going, I don't know what everybody's issues are. I'm fine. I don't get it. I don't know why people want to fight and argue and just get stressed out. I'm fine. My life is good. You could be that person. All right. So you're not going to need to step into step 7, where the healing begins. The flood, Noah, the called person. And if you notice, 7, the healing starts 7-3-3-7 grid. 7 right there. This is so we're seeing micro and macro in the numbering system in the patterning that is going on. Not only is there a flood for a purging, but it's right at step 7, chapter 7, another 7. 11, there's a separation between us and the old. We're creating a new religion. The Babylonians are done, although we're going to find all of these links in there. What happened? Christians do the same things, right? You guys didn't keep your covenant with God, so God choose us instead. It's like people morphing off of somebody else's God. We're the new chosen people from you, and it just continues to happen that way. As long as you're within a tribe someplace that works for you, it's that's a functional way that society works, whether it's the best thing or not. That's how it works. What's another number we've got? We've got a 12, and the 12 is. Chapter 12 is right where the beginning of this is where the Abrahamic religion begins. Abram and Sarai are called, and this whole Abram is scared and gives up his wife Sarai to Pharaoh and gets slaves and animals back. This is going to be something that is not, this is not a plain language thing, guys. Sorry, seriously. You have to interpret this stuff, and we'll interpret it all the same way. Abram and Sarai is me, or you, and the corruption is represented like first sin. It's just another way of carrying the idea that my inner being is now corrupted, and I'm carrying these things with me as I go through life. Something else that happens in these is you see a creation happen, and whoever the creator is disappears from the scene. If we go to the Enuma Elish, you will see that Apsu, the creator, gets trapped away and is not able to participate until Marduk, the called hero, is the one that destroys the earlier self. And then Apsu returns at that point. When we get to Genesis, it's not exactly that way, but what we see is somehow, after the Cain and Abel story, God just disappears. And not until we get to the end of the Adam's analog farm in the beginning of the 6, where the sons of God had corrupted the beautiful daughters of men, representing our lives are corrupted at that point. That right there is the point where God returns. Only after everything is bad. That's when the cycle of inner healing begins. That disconnection, that higher awareness that we live from, that we come from, that we live from unaware of it as children, we lose that as we live through life. What we're doing now when we heal is to go reestablish the connection with that higher self. That's what that represents right there. And then when you see monomyths all beginning, you'll see God appear. That's when God is appearing. God appears to Noah. God appears to Ezekiel. God appears to any of them. Daniel. Yeah, all of them. When it begins, you can go to Revelation and see, and God appears at that time. These are all going to be a pattern. Where's God? For the time things are bad. Cycles of pain happen. When we get to the 12, Abram and Sarai, we're going to see the same thing. God puts them in a place of famine and then disappears and doesn't return. There's cyclical pain that happens in there. It's held in the plagues, but God doesn't return until it's time to advance Abram to Abraham. And then we have look for those cycles. Where's God? Not there all the time, huh? During the time when we're living unaware, that's when God is gone. Without continuing to take the time to pull up the details, you would see it if you continued on. You see that 17 is one of the good numbers, and that 17 was collected. Sarai's name is repeated 17 times. If you get to chapter 17 right here, we see where God creates the covenant with Abraham, and then what happens the next step, 18, the evil one? The Sodom, and the entire Sodom analog farm. The sequence is going to continue in the big numbers as well as the small numbers, but you have to know what the numbers are for it to even be meaningful. Okay, so far I don't know of any way to make this any easier. I probably over-explain things. I don't know what people need, so I'm just trying to. I'm actually learning as I go. Okay. So what I want to do here is I'm going to take a look at Genesis here. I'm going to make sure that I've got exactly what Langton has. It goes up to verse 31 and stops right there. The sixth day creation. If you find Bibles that are descended from the Septuagint, you will not see seventh day repeated 3 times. It'll say sixth day once and then seventh day twice. So that would be a tough variation. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start keeping a list of things in here. Let's see, God, first of all. How many times is God repeated? 32 times. And we know that 30 and 2 is a good number. So they're purposefully doing this. They're making sure that every word that is used is given a specific value. They're not just throwing them up willy-nilly. Heaven. They're making sure it is said exactly 7 times. Well, they said 8. Langton straightened that out. This also was a different, I don't know what went on. Different sources, different authors. Maybe it came from different numbering systems that got straightened out after they were combined. I don't know. Earth. 21. Sodom is repeated 21 times in the entire book of Genesis, which would tell us that Sodom, or that Earth, is a derogatory thing. Why would that be? We have to understand they're analogous terms, but they mean something in the mental realm. If we're living from heaven, that means living detached. If we're living from earth, we're living from our connected, I'm not aware, I'm just living through my memories. That's earth. Heaven is being free of that. So earth is indeed a derogatory thing, and they're weighting it with that value to help you understand what to do with it. Here's a non-biblical example that might be easier. If I wanted to teach somebody that as long as you're mentally hanging on to an anguish and a memory that you won't let go of and you won't forgive somebody, that you're going to continue to have experiences derogatory from it. And if you want to be free of that, you have to forgive that person. Most people are going to say, up yours. Theirs. They suck. I hate them. And they're going to continue to have the experience. So you can't really spread that around. But if you nest it in a teaching such as an anchored ship cannot sail, and somebody always knows that those are analogs. I'm the ship. The ship is an analog representing me. The anchor means something that I'm hanging on to. And as long as I'm hanging on to it, that I can't become free of it. So that's how the verse itself works. Now what they're doing further here is they're putting that into a story where they would say an anchored ship, where they're going to probably say ship exactly 3 times or 7 times or something like that, and anchor exactly 8 times or 13 times or 21 times or something like that, so that if you knew that count in the background, you would know that the ship is the good thing and the anchor is the bad thing. You'd probably have something with the sea in there as well, something with the ocean, that being the sea of life. You can create something very big out of it. But it's that numbering repeat that they're doing in the stories. And when you read Genesis or any book of the Bible, look for the repeats. That's what they're doing. All right, what's next is I need to start accounting for these, but I don't want to add more counts in. For example, God right here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take time. I won't show all of this stuff, but I'll come up here and do the find and replace, and I'll go anywhere that there is God, and I'm just going to do this right here. There. And what's going to happen then is that as we read it, in the beginning, God, 33, and that 33 lets us know that it has been repeated 33 times right here in the book of, or just chapter 1. Just chapter 1, rather. Heaven, I'll do the same thing, 7 times. All right, so if you looked at some of my other work, you'll know where these numbers come from then as I'm putting them up here. And if I put up 2, for example, right here, let me find one that's not too big. Let's see, how about something face? I'm going to look for face in here. Face is said exactly 3 times. There should be no surprise about these repeats at some point. I'm going to replace all of those. What I'm also going to do, however, is go over to the entire book of Genesis and look for face. And I'm going to make sure that that's what I've got here. All right, so from the entire book of Genesis, what we have is 53. So What I would do here then, in this case, let's see, I don't want to change it to face. There we go. All right, so in a case like this, what you see then is that if you see face 3 and 53, the first 3 denotes how many times it's repeated in this chapter, and the second number, the 53, denotes how many times it's been repeated in the entire book of Genesis. And we see that face in both cases is a good thing. We've got 3 here, and we've got a 50. Remember in the analog farm in Sodom, 50, 50, 50, 50, 4 times. There's 50 books in the book of Genesis. 50 is a good number. And 3 is a good number. Yeah, we got it right there. So these are the things that I'll go and just start going through here. And it might look kind of messy at the end, but that is what I'm going to be doing. I won't sit here and record it all. That would be very boring. I'll get back with you. I don't have it completely done, but as you go through, what I'm going to just tell you, if you look through here, you will see that they are very carefully, not just random or a handful of words here or there, but very specifically with the nouns and verbs. They are repeating them very specific. They are maintaining a very specific count. Interpretation beginning, we've got one, it's said 6 times at the beginning, all through Genesis. Interesting. God is 33 here and 238, which is odd. You would think, wait a minute, why would God be a bad thing? Nobody would interpret it that way, would they? But what does it sound like to hear this? I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. If we go to Taoism, it's going to very simply teach us that that we're mental products. What we name, all the things that we name. Naming is the origin of the 10,000 things. Naming the experiences we have become what we live through. And that if we let go of that, the mystery of life emerges. When you're hanging on to something, you continue to see the manifestation of it. When you let go, you float free. Yet mystery and manifestation come from the same source. That everything that we experience in life is energy that comes from somewhere, and it's getting filtered through us. So God could be a good thing or a bad thing. If something bad is happening, well, that's a part of the karmic experience, but it's really based on the nature of, the accumulation of our mind is what we're living through. And people that don't like that term karmic experience, what I want to do is rephrase it for you and quote it from Jesus, that judge not lest you be judged, for the judgment with which you judge others will be judged likewise unto you. We know that that's not in the physical world, huh? I could love and forgive all kinds of people and they'll still hate me for being not them. So it doesn't work, does it? What this means up here, that when you're judging something up here, you become products of and you live through that in the same way anybody else teaches. And that is what a karmic experience is, living through the mote in your eye. You call it something different. Make it a Jesus sound. I don't mean to get into full-blown interpretation, though. There's a few things in here, like where you see darkness, where I've got it highlighted with the yellow there in a 4. What that is jogging me, telling me that I searched. Darkness appears 4 times right here in this story, and then nowhere else in Genesis does darkness appear. Dark appears. There's other terms that appear, but the term darkness itself, there's a few places in the Bible that look like they come from other sources, where there's a handful of words that appear there that don't appear anywhere else, and we'll see them as we move along. Both of these 2 creation stories, as well as the Babel story, have got terms in there that don't appear anywhere else except in those stories. They're from a different source. Those would be author styles, time styles, location, regional styles, or something like that. If 2 authors write something and they put them together, and you could tell the difference between the 2 authors. They're going to be, and even if they kind of sound the same, they're both going to favor certain kind of words or certain kind of patterns or a certain length of sentence, a certain amount of commas. They're going to have a certain individual style that if you analyze them, they're not the same. And that's what you could do here. But if you don't analyze it, you don't see that. See that firmament 9 times right here, and only right here in this creation story. Nowhere else in Genesis is firmament used. I'm going to show you how much this spreads, and it's hard to track down. Do you see there's a kind right here? Do you see where I have kind and then there's an asterisk? Kind does appear right here. exactly 10 times, yes, in this first chapter. If I go to the entire book of Genesis, I'll show you why I use that asterisk. So here it comes up 39, and that doesn't seem right to me. And as I look through, I realize there's other things. Oh, there's kindness, kindly, kindred. Yeah, so I need to start looking a little closer. Kindred, exactly 10 times. You see that this is going to continue on. It will not stop. Kindly, 4. So these are going to break down. That's where the 9 is going to come into play. So we don't want to say kind is 39 times, but we're going to look through and see that kindly fits the criteria of the numbering count. Kindred does. You know what was the other ones here? Kindness. Exactly 5 times. Yeah, you see, we could just keep breaking it down that way. It doesn't matter where you go with the words. You keep finding that happening like that. It is astounding, yet we would never know it. Just look at it. You'd go, yeah, you would. How would you know that without having it memorized? There's no possible way. There is no possible way to see that. It is incredibly protected. We're carrying the ark. We're not seeing inside of it. This is looking inside. I've said before that they do it with all the nouns and verbs, and I think people think that's, like saying, oh, yeah, I got a million of them. It's an over-exaggeration. I don't do that. No, they're doing it with all the nouns and verbs, like holy. All right, so where does this leave us? We're not even into interpretation yet, are we? Do you see how many layers there are, what there is in here? But I'm showing something that people would not normally see. It's like, what is that? When I first saw it, I couldn't believe it. I would walk away from it and just like ponder and go, no, I didn't see that. And I come back and I keep looking and looking. I'm getting used to it now. What's a sign? Just a one time. All right, what we want to do is keep looking at, we've got grass. That might only be 1. 2, actually. Bring forth, brought forth. Ah, yes, the calling it into. That's where we might be seeing the doublets coming into play, huh? Wherever there's 2. Grass. I'll change that one to seed. You see, I'm just doing it right here. I'm not grabbing it from the entire Bible. It takes too long. I think everybody should be able to look at and see what's going on at this point. If you're following, you know what's going on. Or you may not know what's going on. You're just going, what the heck is all that stuff? Fruit. Six times there, too. Rule. 3. You see, is that you just keep going through that. Oh, yeah, definitely. It is every noun and verb is being counted out. There's some that puzzle me. For example, the 11 for the waters, it ends up being 32 in the whole Bible, but right here, 11 would denote not a good thing. What else was there? There was something else that I thought I saw. Divide. 5 and 15, divided. Earth 21, I can explain that one. The waters being bad, I can't explain. But I also couldn't explain the heaven being said 8 times here either. There was an anomaly. And this one, if it was left in, no big deal. Who's counting water? If water is said the wrong amount of times because somebody was using a competing numbering system, whoever wrote this or something, I don't know. Yeah, there's a few anomalous things in here. But, okay, so we haven't even gotten into what this is saying. And look at how difficult it looks to read right now, too. Honestly, this is like a 2-dimensional representation of what should be in our brains that is all at once there. So it's even watching what I'm doing has got to be very cumbersome compared to what they could just pop it up. Imagine things that you do that you can just imagine in your head how to disassemble or reassemble or do something that you know by force of habit. They had that going on here. It would be that simple for them. And we are very far away from it. What is happening right here is, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The heaven and the earth is the mind of the person. There was no mind. It was without form and void and darkness. There was just emptiness. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Our awareness began to settle in. Let there be light, and there was light. We look at right on verse 3. Light, light. We are born. We're awake. And God said, and God saw the light, and it was good, and divide the light from the darkness. We're getting a mind and a body. Light at 13. I just saw it again. That's the one. It's like, why is a light 13? 13 is not okay. That's another one of those anomalous ones that make you go, this first one had some problems with it, it looks like. Sounds good, sounds wonderful. It's got some rich poetry to it, but they were like, up yours with your numbers. We're going to make everything bad instead of good. We're going to invert it. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out, some ideas, because it's like we had, that was light at 13, water at 11, and heaven at 8. All of them seeming like they don't quite fit with, they're not consistent with the rest of the Bible program. And as we go along through creation, what we're going to have, it gets thick, and I don't know if I want to go through this part of the interpretation, just kind of stick with the numbers. You know what? I'm not really going through it with a fine-tooth comb, am I? I'm going through it with a kind of a coarse comb. Fowl. Winged fowl. Fowl 6 times. Doing this is what gives them the weight, that gives them their value. So as we go through and look at them later, you can decide whether or not it's a good thing or not, whether what they're trying to convey as an analog. You know, like when they say naked and you go, uh-oh, I don't interpret that. That means I'm naked in my tent, drunk. And when you interpret the analogs, you realize that means, oh, I feel good. I'm in my new self. I have a new feeling, and I'm uncovered from whatever it was I was covered from. So that's why it's important to know what these numbers are for the interpretation. Signs, seasons, days, and years. Yeah. I don't know if I'm missing anything in here. All right, so I'll let you know what they're doing in the stories here is that they're trying to create the story about that it fits on an outward life experience. Here's how it works. But what it's really doing is it's built off of a life cycle analog. So all of the animals, the fish, the things like that are a normal part of your life represent the things that emerge from you. The birds of the air, your thoughts, good birds, bad birds. We've got, some that eat what they shouldn't. Yeah, we'll get into that. The animals would represent physical characteristics, qualities, things that we do that we pick up along the way. Things that happen down the road, like as we get at the beautiful daughters of men, those represent our early childhood qualities of trust and caring and love and, non-judgment that have all been corrupted by the sons of God, which means life experiences have corrupted that. And now Nephilim, the anger, the fear, the depression, all of the things then that control our lives, those are the Nephilim. Everything has to be represented somehow in a manner that is analogous. When people are not interpreting them and calling them just true, you're just really worshiping what sounds like mythology that's wrapped up in a religious shell. If we take a look at the word likeness, it's only said one time here in this chapter, but it's said 3 times in all of Genesis. So if I go to the King James Version to see where it appears, and I find that the other 2 times it shows up is right here at the beginning of chapter 5, right inside of that analog farm, in between the 777 and the 770 and 7. So, yeah, you can link these pieces together. And it's repeated 3 times, which is a good amount of times, and 1 is a good amount of times. So, yeah, I don't know if anybody can really follow this. It's a lot to wrap one's head around. At some point, something should become very evident, even if you don't know what the numbers are. That when you look at the repeats in the number pool, you go, that's not random. It is not random. It's, you can have a 7 here or 3 there or something like that, but for these 22 numbers to show up 6,000 times, and then as you start looking, those are just the numbers that are visible. That doesn't even account for how many times nouns and verbs have been repeated that exact amount of times as well. You look at that and you go, that is not random. That is not an accident. That's a man-made structure, very artfully structured. And it requires growing into it, like they did. They grew into it. They lived through it. We do not. All right, so if we go through here, I just want to take a look and make a note of some things. We've got 1, 6, 33. Those are all good numbers. 5 is good. We've got an 11 created. That's an odd thing. You know what? I should list these numbers. We've got created, waters, light, day. There's a handful of things that don't seem quite like they fit, but then other things, you get kind, 10, living creature, 3, but then 8 overall. Living creature is your qualities. They could be good or bad. You could be a nice person or an angry person. What are the living creatures that come out of you? Kindness, I help you across the street, or I hate you, I kick your feet out from underneath you. Those are living creatures. So it just depends on how you're using it in the story. Let us make man in our image. That's going to be... Boy, image is said 8 times in the entire Bible. So, yeah. Created 5:11. Okay, so fish. Oh, I didn't get that one, did I? I don't see... Fish was 2. I just didn't... I looked that up. I just didn't add it in. All right, so... All right, at this point, I don't know where we are. I know what that is doing. I know what the numbering pattern is doing. I can continue to show that and describe what that is. And what it's really doing is setting up how the religion is going to work and how the stories are going to work. We're going to use this kind of a process. We're not going to make it into something that's plain language. Buddha, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. It's founded on our thoughts. It's based in our thoughts. This one does something different. The Father dies inside of the Son. Figure that out. It has to be mental. It's iterations of us then. When you finally resolve what that is, it's like, it's a mental process. It is a mental process. So, but it's carried in such different vehicles. Many outward are the roads that lead to destruction. The religion itself is a carrier vehicle for the template. The numbering pattern is there purposefully for us to understand and to find it. They are artfully done. And you know what? Go through the rest of the Bible and find the exact same thing in every book of the Bible, all the way down to Revelation. There's no exception. This continues to happen. Okay, let's just play with it real quick here. I popped up Ezekiel from the King James Version right here. And right off the bat, we see there's a 30, there's a 4, there's our 5th, there's a 5th, there's a 5th. They start right off the bat. Those are right off the list we've been collecting. There's no difference there. But you look at it and go, well, that's not very much. Where is he? He's by the river of the Chebar, among captives by the river Chebar. It sounds like there's a good thing ready to happen, but it must be from a bad place, do you think? It's time to start. Let's go look at Chebar. It's repeated exactly 8 times. What does that tell us? Chebar is a bad place that we need to leave. You know what else to recognize here? Step back from it. There's a crossing of a threshold that needs to happen if you were to utilize Campbell's monomyth template. What that means, turning inward to the mind, and the river crossing right here is that. Where do we see it elsewhere? We're going to have the flood is a crossing of a threshold, Noah's flood. We're going to have in Exodus the crossing of the Red Sea is the crossing of the threshold. Jason and the Argonauts sail through the clashing rocks. Jesus goes through a baptismal. Jonah is eaten by a whale and goes to the threshold into the belly, 3 days. Jesus into a tomb, 3 days. All of these are, you go into a threshold, you go in and you emerge pure. You do some battle, you defeat something, and you emerge. Right here at the River Chebar, it's the calling, it's all good, the time is there, the date is proper. It comes from that number pool, and we're at a bad place to start with. It's time to go. The story's going to work that way if you know how it works. You've got the analogs, but you also have the numbering pattern that's going to help you understand whether the analog is good or bad. Let's see. Visions. See how that numbering pattern, what I was talking about there? Let me split these out real quick. Here's one where there's a sentence right here, and verse 1. Then verse 2, it's not a complete sentence. 3 completes it. Why would you do that? He's pushing meanings to be in the right verse, to be in the right numbered verse. And their feet were straight, and the sole of the feet were like a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. Okay, there is so much behind the scenes. And then you reason that through, and you look at Langton and realize what he was doing. Then you have to sit back and go, you know what? By association, then, we know that the Catholic Church knows that this is what this is. They know that they're managing a control system, and that there's something behind it that they're not telling people. They're also the ones that said, just worship Jesus, and turned Christianity into the incredible, diverse, you can't even recognize it as anything good and kind, just because individuals are good and kind within the religion. The religion itself is just society. What do you want? It's a tribe. Yeah, everybody belongs. If everybody that's a Christian and believes in God goes to heaven, it's going to look just like Earth. Yeah, there's something in here that's an inward path, and the people that carry the religion don't turn inward. They will feel something and call that turning inward, but that's not. That's looking outward, relinquishing, and then having a good emotional feeling as a result of it. That is not turning in and resolving anything. They'll turn right around and judge people harshly for things that they're still holding as their own fears, pain, shame, anger, hatred, judgments. The dividing stops when you find the template and you find that this is a personal path, but you know what? There are very few people that are going to do it. Very few. So I'm going to end this because of the length of the video. Yeah, they get big. There's just no way to cover it. If you can fathom the scope of this, you would say, yeah, you're not going to get that done very quickly. It's going to take a while. But even then, no matter how much time I put into it, it doesn't matter. Whoever the recipient is, the only reason I know this is because I've gone after it and I've sunk my teeth into it and I ponder it and I run it through my mind and I try to figure it out, that I'm constantly doing that. That's what they would have been doing. That's what it would take. I don't think it's going to be successful. That's why I talk to people that are Dr. So-and-so teaching mythology, and you talk to them about the repeating patterns and they won't even reply. It's like, buddy, that stuff's done to death. Meanwhile, you look at it and go, you can't see it. Few people can see it. Do you know Plato's story of Atlantis? You know what that is? That's creation without a monomyth. That is the creation of each human society all the way up to it needs to be destroyed, but there's not a return. We got a mental hierarchy, 3. He's got a city of Atlantis, 3, the outer city, the inner part, and then the most inner holy sanctum, the middle part. That's a version of a monomyth, and people by the millions go look for Atlantis on the bottom of the ocean. Biblical archaeology. Boy, it's really not much different than the same sort of thing. Or listening to flat earthers, people that, yeah, I believe this, I got this over here, there's, this evidence proves that. It's like, there are billions of tombs. Most of them have been destroyed and gone by now. The fact that you find one that has a J on it doesn't mean that the Bible is true. Doesn't mean that when Jesus, who is 12, when he disappears, they spend 3 days looking for him while he's wowing the wise men in the temple. He's 30 years old when he starts his ministry, and he crosses the threshold at the baptism and spends 40 days in the wilderness. Yeah, you need to look a little closer to home. You find what's there. Few people can see it. I haven't found too many yet. Anyway, so yeah, as far as this is concerned, I'll finish up chapter 1 with this right here, then it's big. Chapter 2 is going to feed off of this video, and it'll jump right into it much quicker. And I'll just reference people. It's going to be a slow ramp startup to get going, because there's so much you have to know before you get underway. It's not it's not just a simple puzzle you solve. There are layers to it, and it's very personally, mentally interactive. And it's cryptic. However, there's always one destination. Whoever put these together had one goal in mind. They didn't have a bunch of goals in mind. It was one goal in mind. So if there's a bunch of interpretations, there's a bunch of people wrong. All right. Hope the video was interesting. Questions, comments? I'll see you in the next video.